Hi there, I'm Andrew Dunbar. I'm the scheme manager for the Wamaran Irrigation Scheme. My role on site is to make sure that we provide a safe delivery of the project for Pensar for our client Unity Water. So we've got multiple work areas, 5 on the pipeline, 2 in the facilities, and in those work areas you've got multiple hazards. Things like lifting, trenching, excavation, plant-to-plant interaction, plant-to-people interaction. All of those things are hazards that are general everyday hazards on a construction site. But what I'd ask you to do is work together collaboratively with your team to assess the hazards on a daily basis, making sure that you take personal responsibility and personal accountability to ensure that you've assessed those hazards and mitigated them where you can. One of the important factors is that we need to ask questions. If we can't mitigate a hazard or the risk of a hazard becoming real, then we need to ask questions of our supervisor or even our workmates and just say, does this seem right to you? Does this what good looks like? So if you can just take that away, from this induction, if you take one thing away from that, it's really just working together to make sure that you assess those hazards as a group, individually, and make sure that you put those mitigations in place. And ask a question if you don't know the answer. Don't be afraid to ask that question. So look forward to seeing you out on the site somewhere, whether it be on the pipeline or the facilities, and have a safe day.
Working safely generally involves obeying rules, following safe work practices, and using appropriate PPE. When asked about what motivates us to work safely, we usually rattle off the same old stuff. To keep my boss happy, to keep the safety guys off my back, to uphold the company days without incident record, to keep my job. The reason that you don't often hear is, I work safely for myself and for my family. There are only 3 reasons why you should be motivated to work safe: for yourself, for your family, and for your workmates. Safety is a serious matter, and in fact, it is our number 1 priority. The safety of today does not guarantee tomorrow's safe workplace. Whatever the task at hand, it's the safety of our people and their surrounding environment that matters most. At Pensar, we work hard to empower our people with the knowledge, tools, and most importantly, the authority to actively reduce risk and stop unsafe practices. This includes demonstrating safe behaviours, making safer choices, seeking constant means of improvement and sustainability to ensure that we are all protected from harm and returning safely home. Nevertheless, when you get injured at work, the first person who suffers is you. You suffer the physical pain of the injury itself. This pain can be short-lived or it can be long-term depending on the type of injury incurred. For more serious injuries, recovery can be quite a painful process as you struggle through countless operations or prolonged physiotherapy. Some injuries are permanent and can cause long-term disability and lifelong suffering. You can also suffer emotional pain. Fears about not being able to return to work can cause anxiety and low self-esteem. You may no longer be able to do the things you love and make you happy, like playing a round of golf, getting on your bike for a ride, or going to the beach with your children. The minimum requirements for personal protection equipment, PPE, includes collared shirt with long sleeves, pulled down and buttoned up, high visibility clothing, 50mm strip, trousers, steel-toed boots, ankle-high and lace-up, safety glasses other than office-based, safety helmet, gloves on for all tasks, on safety clip at all other times. You may also require respiratory protection, hearing protection, fall restraint, for example safety harness. Requirements for additional PPE is also included in all Safe Work Method Statements, SWMS. Remember, Safe Work Method Statements relevant to the day's work are outlined at the pre-start meeting. You must ensure that you are aware of any foreseen additional PPE requirements for the day, stipulated in the SWMS, when you sign on to the pre-start. First aid qualified personnel and first aid kits are present on every shift. When the treatment of injuries is beyond the capabilities of the first aiders on site, injured workers can be taken to the designated medical facility. Key contacts are on-site notice boards. In case of emergency, dial 000 or 112, mobile. Under work health and safety legislation, PENSAR has a number of responsibilities. PENSAR takes these responsibilities very seriously, and to ensure we comply, the following must take place. Ensure that a Safe Work Method Statement, SWMS, for all proposed works has been reviewed and approved. Ensure all workers receive an induction which identifies on-site hazards and requirements, as well as reviewing and signing off on all relevant Safe Work Method Statements, SWMS. Ensuring all workers have completed an industry induction, blue or white card. Ensure all workers attend a daily pre-start meeting before commencing works on site. PENSAR has done everything reasonably practicable to ensure work can be carried out safely on its sites. PENSAR has put into place systems that are designed to protect the health and safety of all workers, visitors and members of the public on our sites. Systems and processes are continually monitored to ensure they are achieving the desired results. PENSAR has the following certifications: ISO 9001 Safety Management Systems, ISO 14001 Environmental Management Systems, ISO 45001 Quality Management Systems, Federal Safety Accreditation. Every team member has responsibilities. This means that you are required to ensure you maintain certain behaviours, approach your work in a certain way, and commit to the work you have undertaken to perform. You will not be reminded to do these things. If these responsibilities are not carried out, PENSAR will move immediately to a position of warnings and potentially cessation of employment. For your safety, the safety of your fellow colleagues, and ultimately for this project to be a success, these fundamental responsibilities are required to be upheld. Your obligations are: ensure your own safety and health at work. Take reasonable care that your actions or omissions do not adversely affect the health and safety of others. Comply with any reasonable instructions given by relevant people on the project. Maintain and wear all PPE as supplied. Understand the controls required to keep the workplace safe and seek clarification if you are unsure. Stop if you see something unsafe. Everyone will share the responsibility to plan all work activities by assessing risk and implementing controls prior to commencement of work. Attend and actively participate in inductions, toolbox meetings, safety observations, competency assessments, and any other training required to ensure they undertake their work in a safe manner. Read, understand, and apply the requirements established in the Safe Work Method Statements, Standard Operating Procedures, or other specific document related to the work being undertaken. Be familiar with the applicable emergency preparedness requirements. Monitor and mentor new or inexperienced workers to ensure they remain safe and work in accordance with safe and accepted work standards. Comply with any reasonable instruction given by a supervisor. Report all injuries, incidents or hazards, near misses, no matter how minor you think they are, to a PENSAR project manager, engineer, foreman or leading hand immediately. Not conduct any activity that causes or is likely to cause environmental harm without first taking all reasonable and practicable measures to prevent or minimize the harm. Not conduct any activity that causes or is likely to cause harm to yourself or other persons without first taking all reasonable and practicable measures to prevent the harm. It is the duty and the right of everyone employed and engaged by PENSAR to stop work whenever you, your workmate, members of the public, or the local environment are at risk. The request to stop work is fully supported by all levels of management. Stop work should be applied in any of the following situations. 1. There is a change in the conditions around you. 2. the scope of work or plan changes. 3. You don't understand or are unsure of what you are doing. 4. You see an unsafe act or condition that exposes you, others, or the environment to harm. 5. You notice at-risk behaviour. 6. When something goes wrong and there is an accident or near miss or close call. There shall be no blame or fault put on anyone who calls for a stop work, even if, upon investigation, the stop work was deemed unnecessary. Where you identify a situation that requires work to cease, the following process must be followed. Stop the works immediately. Where you are working with other crew members, let them know the issue and have everyone stop work. Call your supervisor and explain the reason why you decided to stop work. You need to clearly tell them what your concerns are and why. Where possible, work with the supervisor and your workmates to correct the situation. Any additional controls will need to be added to the work method statement. When the issues have been corrected and everyone understands the changes that have been made, work can resume. It is your responsibility to be alert to potential hazards and report them to your supervisor. A hazard is anything that could hurt you or someone else. Potential hazards include equipment left in an unsafe manner, frayed electrical cord, or a trip hazard. We expect all workers to remain alert to all hazards and stop. You have permission to stop. You must stop. You must stop a colleague no matter what. This image shows hazards that are commonly encountered on work sites. 1. Workers using a ladder incorrectly, using it to walk between buildings. 2. Workers working from heights on scaffolding without a secured harness. 3. Tools on the ground, which is a trip hazard. 4. A worker on a cherry pickers working too close to power lines and without a harness. 5. Workers not using PPE such as glasses and mask while welding. 6. Worker hanging out of a window on a building high off the ground. 7. A worker standing on top of a hot roof, working in heat and without a harness. 8. A worker working in a confined space. We expect all workers to remain alert to all hazards and stop. You have permission to stop. You must stop. You must stop a colleague no matter what. PENSAR has identified 11 life-saving rules. These rules identify tasks that have the potential for safety hazards and must therefore be carefully managed. These rules will be displayed on site. These rules include energy isolations, where you must always verify and lock all energy isolations, including electricity, water, air, and hydraulic. Next, live services, where a spotter is mandatory. The spotter is there to ensure identification of live services and provide protection. Next, plant and equipment, which must be operated within the defined safety limits. Next, competency. You must never begin a skilled task or operate machinery unless qualified to do so. Next, confined space entry means never enter a confined space without a permit and approval. Next, working at heights. Potential falls from heights over 1.8 metres must be protected. Next, cranes and lifting. Never, and we do mean never, never work or travel under a suspended load. Next, excavations. More than 1.5 metres deep must be benched, battered, shored, or approved by a geotechnical engineer. Next, where there is live traffic, an approved traffic guidance scheme must be in place before working within 6 metres of live traffic. Next, drugs and alcohol. You must not be under the influence of or consume alcohol or illicit drugs at work. And finally, whilst driving, always comply with local and/or site road laws. If you observe any concern around these high-risk tasks, you must stop. You have permission to stop. There are 3 basic steps used to manage health and safety on site. 1. Spot the hazard. 2. Assess the risk. 3. Make the changes to control for the risk. A risk is the possibility that the harm, that is death, injury or illness, might occur when exposed to a hazard. And a risk control refers to the action taken to eliminate health and safety risks so far as is reasonably practicable. If that is not possible, you are required to minimise the risk as far as is reasonably practicable. For every hazard identified on the project, from commencement through to project completion, actions must be identified that either eliminate or reduce the risk associated with the hazard. The following video is an example of risk assessment and application of controls.
Now we're just going to start on by doing a risk assessment for entering our confined space. We currently have a leak within the space. So I'm going to break the risk assessment into the logical job steps. Firstly, about accessing and entering the space, working in the space, and then exit the space. Yep. So we need just to have a look at some of the risks associated with this. And I think working at heights would be one. From there, we've obviously got a leak, so we need to do some isolations.
Yes.
Risks would be the atmosphere.
Yes.
We've also got fall from heights.
Yep.
Possibly sharp objects. Anything else you can think of?
I guess the other thing I could think of would be the access.
Yes.
And barricading.
Right. Yep.
For pedestrians.
Got that.
Just make sure that that's all covered.
Yes.
Yep.
No worries. And control measures, do you think?
Or control measures, obviously barricading for the public. Full PPE, full harness.
Yes.
Using the fall arrest system.
Yep.
And gas testing for the confined space.
Yes.
What we need to do as a control, and then entering under entry conditions, we need to use full winch and
Yep. Got that.
full safe device. And then with our leak, make sure we go in, and depending on what it is, but
Yep.
make sure we go in with PP, maybe a respirator or BA.
Okay. So now we've had a look at the site. What we can do is we'll go back into the office and we'll actually rate this by giving them a score.
Yep, okay, we can do that.
PENSAR has identified a number of pre-existing high-risk hazards that require controls and careful management. These include working at heights, working with or near plant equipment, working near moving vehicles, lifting and working with cranes, driving, fitness for work, manual handling, hot works, excavations, using chemicals, working in a confined space, working near or on water, working with electrical equipment, exposure to silica dust, heat stress, bushfire. Controls will be put in place to address these known hazards, and this induction will inform you of the documentation and processes that are in place on the project to manage these known hazards, as well as hazards that emerge throughout the project. Where there are PENSAR operations that expose workers to the identified major hazards, PENSAR will ensure that the control measures are in place. Where hazards are observed but have not been planned for, you have permission to stop. You must stop. You must stop a colleague, no matter what. The following documentation is key to facilitating safe work practices on the worksite. This documentation is a working tool and enables all personnel to step through the sequence of any particular task, identify and assess any hazards, and then control for the risk for those hazards. Implementation of the PENSAR systems will mean the following. 1. You will need to read and sign on to all relevant SWMs, if you are involved in any high-risk activities. SWMs exist for all high-risk activities and will be tailored to the conditions of that activity to be undertaken at a particular time and location. You are required to review relevant SWMs and sign that documentation as your personal acknowledgement that you have read and understood the SWMs. 2. Daily pre-start. PENSAR requires 4 levels of risk assessment to be done for each and every work task or activity that is undertaken. Firstly, at project commencement, the PENSAR project team and key executives of PENSAR undertake a whole-of-project risk assessment. The documentation to flow out of this assessment includes the project risk register and the project management plans. The second stage requires identified high-risk activities required during the project works to have a template, safe work method statement known as a SWIM, tailored for the specific project activity. Activities such as working at heights, working in confined spaces, and excavations are examples of activities that require SWIMs to be developed. All personnel required to undertake the work activity are required to read and sign the SWIM, acknowledging that they have read and understood what is required and that they will carry out the works in the manner described within the SWIM. The third stage is the daily pre-start. This happens when site personnel assemble for the first time each day. The daily pre-start is a meeting where the pre-start document is discussed. The pre-start document contains an outline of all activities to take place on the site that day and the general hazards that are present. All personnel are required to sign the pre-start, acknowledging that they have read and understood the requirements of the day. This is a key opportunity to discuss, offer alternatives, and identify additional hazards as a group. No site member should walk away from the pre-start and not be clear on the day's activities, the hazards that are present, and what has been done or must be done in order to minimise the risk associated with each hazard. Signing the pre-start also means that you believe you are fit for work. This means that you are well and are not under the influence of alcohol or illicit drugs. Finally, the fourth stage is your individual task assessment. These assessments are discussed in the next section. However, these assessments are done personally and are recorded in the PENSAR-issued task notebook. The task assessment is a process used by PENSAR designed to improve and encourage hazard awareness and alertness amongst personnel immediately prior to commencing a task. This is an informal process that typically applies to routine activities that involve minimal HSC risks. It is similar in operation to other processes such as Take 5 and SLAM. The task assessment requires you to follow 4 key steps. Think about the task. Assess the hazards. Suitably control the hazards. Keep the task mindful of future hazards. The task assessment prompts you, if you identify a hazard that cannot be suitably controlled, to contact your supervisor before proceeding. A well-managed project does not happen by chance or guesswork. We have to think about what could go wrong within the project's scope of works, at our workplace, and what the consequences of that could be. We then must do whatever we can, in other words, whatever is reasonably practicable, to eliminate or minimise risks arising from our work. This process is known as risk management and involves 4 simple steps. Step 1. Identify risk. Find out what could potentially cause harm or result in loss, what is critical to the project in terms of managing time, cost and quality, and achieving the project's objectives to managing health, safety and the environment. Step 2. Assess the risk. Understand the nature of the harm that could be caused by exposure to the hazard or the impact of works. How significant could the harm or impact be? How likely is it to happen? Step 3. Control risk. Implement the most effective control measures reasonably practicable. Step 4. Review control measures. Are controls working as planned? Each step of every work task requires an assessment of the risk. An assessment of the risk requires you to judge 2 factors associated with the task, namely, 1. The consequence, if the risk was to be realised, was to happen, and 2. The likelihood of occurrence. Following these assessments, you need to map those ratings on the following risk score calculator to determine the overall risk rating: extreme, high, moderate, or low. Following the identification of a hazard and assessing its risk rating, you must proceed to identifying controls that will remove or reduce the risk rating. There are a number of ways a hazard can be controlled. The key questions to be asked include: can the hazard be eliminated or removed from the workplace? Can the product or process be substituted for a less hazardous alternative? Can the hazard be engineered away with guards or barriers? Can administration controls be adopted, that is, procedures, job rotation, etc.? Can personal protective equipment and clothing be worn to safeguard against hazards? Incident reporting is a very important part of our continual improvement process. Reporting incidents, especially near misses and first aid injuries, gives us the opportunity to review and implement controls so that the chances of reoccurrence on any PENSAR project is limited. Reporting is not only limited to work duties, but can also include worker concerns and operator performance. All incidents, injuries and near misses, no matter how minor you think they are, must be reported to your supervisor or foreman immediately. They are responsible for informing the project work health and safety officer and the project manager. All incidents are then investigated and reported as required. If a near miss or incident report is required, the incident report form must be completed and forwarded to the project work health and safety officer. There are some incidents that are defined under legislation as notifiable incidents. These include any incident involving death, serious lacerations, electric shock, and serious head or eye injury. If there has been a notifiable incident, then the incident scene cannot be disturbed until approval is given by the HESQ manager. The only exception to this is to make the incident scene safe. A full definition of notifiable incident can be found in the Work Health and Safety Management Plan. In summary, workplace health and safety issues need to be resolved. If they are not, workers may be exposed to hazards resulting in injury or death, and business may bear considerable financial cost. Talking about health and safety issues that have been raised is the best way to resolve them. If there is a safety issue on site, you are encouraged to report this to the site management team. PENSAR has an open door policy and will review the issue and implement adequate controls to resolve it. The issue and the controls must be reported using the incident reporting procedure. A copy is kept on the site notice boards.